Why is it that every time Africa stands up for itself, every time we get a leader who refuses to kneel before foreign powers, suddenly they say we're in crisis? Suddenly we become the epicenter of terrorism. That is exactly what the US General Michael Langley is saying, and he stands by his words anytime, any day, at any press briefing. Let me ask you something. Was Burkina Faso a bigger threat when France was looting its resources, or now that Ibrahim Traore is standing for the people? This is Pulse of Africa, your #1 African news platform on YouTube. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. You're welcome to the Pulse of Africa community. I hope you're doing great today. If you're joining us for the first time, don't hesitate to like, share, and subscribe to stay informed and connected to Africa's most important news reports. Your engagements will help this video to reach more people. Thank you very much. The US recently held a digital press briefing on the African Chiefs of Defense Conference 2025 with the commander of US Africa Command, US Marine Corps General Michael Langley, just yesterday on May 30th, 2025. And you won't believe what General Langley said. Africans should wise up this time around and not fall for any propaganda by the West, which puts Africa in the dark all the time. Let's quickly listen to the conversation.
We will begin today's briefing with opening remarks from General Langley. Then we will turn to your questions. We'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can during the briefing. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to General Langley for his opening remarks.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for taking time to talk to me today. I'm calling from Nairobi, Kenya, where we were wrapping up a significant event, the African Chiefs of Defense Conference. This year, we were joined by senior military leaders from over 37 African nations. And let me explain the dialogue. The dialogue here was powerful. It was focused on African-led solutions, regional cooperation, and long-term security strategies. These conversations reaffirmed something critical, that African militaries are not waiting to be saved. African militaries are taking on security challenges head-on and leverage opportunities for their nations to achieve stability and prosperity. So right now, as I speak to you, they continue to step up and take control of their own futures. Today, I want to emphasize U.S. AFRICOM's strategic approach. I've been charged by the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, to mitigate threats to the U.S. homeland posed by terrorist organizations, the most dangerous of which are unfortunately right here on the African continent. Now, to do this, first of all, AFRICOM is increasingly focused on helping our African partners address the root causes of terrorism. That means tackling instability at the local level through intelligence sharing, capacity building, and institutional strengthening, using and recommending tools beyond just the military might. So security is rooted in the strength of communities. Militaries must therefore be deeply integrated into society writ large to ensure safety and prosperity. Now, over the years of during my tenure of command, since 2022, my travels to Kenya, I was able to get out in the community. I visited Kibera and met with the grassroots organization, which is the Starting for Hope for Communities, the SHOFO, led by Dr. O'Day. And Mr. Kennedy, he showed me the way in all the activities in which he was doing. Work over 40 counties across Kenya, mobilizing community-led efforts that prevent violence and build lasting peace. Now, that's the model of how real security starts at the ground level with the people. Now, AFRICOM's aim is to support African nations in building the self-reliance needed to confront terrorism and insurgency by assisting in building strong, capable military and security forces. Our partnership is summed up in 3 words: peace through strength. Strong partnerships are the best representation of that thought, because we're always stronger when we stand together. Second, While here at the HOD conference, we are having honest conversations about burden sharing. As resources are rebalanced globally, it is essential that all partners around the globe, Africa included, take more ownership in their regional and continental security. So that's why our military engagements emphasize the readiness of independent operations. We had exercises this spring leading into the summer, like African Lion in North Africa, Flintlock in the Sahel, and the Express Maritime Series, Obagami Express in the West. Now, Cutlass was done in the East, and then Phoenix Express was done in the Mediterranean. So across the periphery of Africa, we see that all these exercises together are no longer about dependence. It's about progressing to independent operations, building interoperability among nations. So interoperability that will enable crisis response and command level leadership among African militaries. Let's just justify the Corps. This was the largest military exercise in East Africa. It trains over 1,300 troops from up to 20 nations across the continent of Africa. We do this each and every year. Kenya, along with Djibouti and Tanzania, they led from this front in the 2025 exercise by co-hosting the exercise. This is the kind of regional leadership exactly in the direction where we want to go, and we're encouraging it across the continent. Let me speak plainly about the threats, though. We in the world, and specifically Africans, are facing increasingly as years go by. The Sahel, that's where we consider it the epicenter of terrorism. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are confronted with this each and every day. They're in crisis. The terrorist networks affiliated with ISIS and Al-Qaeda are thriving, particularly in Burkina Faso, where the government has lost control of wide swaths of territory across their sovereign nation. Attacks are resurging in the Lake Chad region as well, and extremist groups are growing more aggressive. One of the terrorists' new objectives is gaining access to West Africa coast. If they secure access to the coastline, they can finance their operations through smuggling, human trafficking, and arms trading. This puts not just African nations at risk, but also increases the chance of threats to reaching the U.S. shores. That's why our coastal partners, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Benin, are fighting fiercely along their northern borders to prevent terrorist expansion, and U.S. AFRICOM is standing with them. In East Africa, in support of Somalia, the federal government, the U.S. is actively pursuing and eliminating jihadists. And at the request of the Somali government, this year alone, AFRICOM has conducted over 25 airstrikes, double the number of strikes that we did last year. But I must emphasize, we do prioritize protecting civilians. That is our moral imperative. AFRICOM has the highest standards in the region when it comes to protecting civilians that may find themselves surrounded by conflict. We do everything possible to keep them safe. Now, we're also focused on a broader strategic competition. My second charge from the Secretary Hexet is to confront military ambitions of the Chinese Communist Party on the continent. So while the U.S. works to build transparency and respectful partnerships, China continues to pursue access to Africa's resources, often ignoring long-term sustainability. So we're taking a different approach, one that links security with trade. We know private investment cannot thrive without safety. That's why AFRICOM's role is so vital. We're not just helping build military capacity for African nations, we are helping build a stability that underpins both African and American prosperity. Now, during my travels, I just want to note, the last 3 years, I've seen these investments firsthand. And it is clear to me that the whole of society approach is necessary to address these challenges. And I meet across the society and the community, especially across the youth, who are our future of the African continent, being able to stabilize and reach all the opportunities for prosperity. In Algeria, I met with a youth robotics team applying technology to solve local problems. That is proof that African innovation will be a force of stability in the future. I did the same thing in Morocco. Spoke to over 200 young cadets at the military academy. These are tomorrow's military leaders of the future, grounded in their service and discipline. Also, down last year at the CHODS conference in Botswana, I did go to a PEPFAR. This was supported medical station that saw firsthand the life-saving impacts and collaboration that saved over 20 million lives across Southern Africa. And then lastly, in Gabon, young students enrolled in STEM and robotics programs showed how they plan to use their projects in the future. And then also, while visiting young African leaders in Mauritania, to Nigeria, and to Somalia, I've seen young people that are getting the opportunities for prosperity in the future. So that was the rewards of my adventures to be able to visit various African countries, not just in the military sense, but across civil society. Now, I will say, AFRICOM's goal is to deepen partnerships. It's about the mutual goal of keeping our homeland safe, and it's about long-term capacity, not dependence. It's about empowering African nations to solve African problems, not just through handouts, but through trusted cooperation. A safe and stable and prosperous Africa is not a charitable goal. It's a strategic necessity for the United States and for our African partners. AFRICOM is leaning in with a targeted training and advanced intelligence sharing and to support institutions that endure long after exercises end or commanders rotate. So let me close with this. This will likely be my last final Chiefs of Defense conference as the AFRICOM commander. A nomination for my successor is expected soon. But no matter who holds this position, the AFRICOM mission remains constant. AFRICOM will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with African partners and into the future. It's been an honor to stand with all of you. And I'm excited to see Africa's emerging leaders drive progress, not just across the continent, but across the world. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
So the question is, for how many years has the US been in Africa pretending to help us? They say it's about democracy, about freedom, about security. But Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger were never safe under Western watch. We were dying in our own homes. Our villages were burning. Our children were disappearing. And all they sent were empty promises and more soldiers. So now, when we decide to rise up, when we find leaders like Ibrahim Traore who actually listen to the people, suddenly he's a threat. Suddenly he's aligned with Russia. Let's stop pretending. This is not about security. It's about the gold. It's about the uranium, about our land. Do you think America cares about the people of Burkina Faso? If they cared, why did they stay silent when France was exploiting us? Why didn't they support us when terrorists killed our people for years? But now that we say no more and kick out foreign soldiers, they come with lies. They send generals, cameras, and propaganda. They call our leaders military dictators because they are afraid of Africans who are finally thinking for themselves. Because they are afraid of young presidents like Traore who say, Africa must stand alone. That's what this is really about. Look at how they talk about us, like we are dumb, like we don't know what's good for us, but we Africans are not fools. We know the games they play. They call rebels freedom fighters when they work for them, but call Pan-Africans terrorists when they don't bow to their terms. Ibrahim Traore is not your puppet, and the Sahel states are not yours to police.
Thank you, General Langley. We'll now begin the question and answer portion of today's briefing. So for our first question, I'll go to Chris Gordon of Air and Space Forces magazine. And his question is, what are the consequences of the U.S. leaving Niger? What alternative basing arrangements have been agreed to or are being pursued?
Oh, okay. Hey, thanks for that question. Chris, I'll just say that, since we left this year in September of last year, we're observing a rise in attacks by violent extremist organizations, not only in this year, but across the Sahel, to include Nigeria as well, and emanating and going into Burkina Faso and Mali. Now, this increases is measurable by both frequency and complexity of these attacks, driven by persistent and social economic grievances, and the proliferation of weapons and increased capable terrorist groups across the board. So, unfortunately, with our withdrawal from the region, we have lost our ability to monitor these terrorist groups closely, but continue to liaise with partners to provide what support we can.
Thank you, General. Our second question goes to Fadi Mansour, Al Jazeera Media Network. And the question is, how hopeful is General Langley that AFRICOM's efforts in Libya will lead to military reunification? And are there any considerations to redeploy U.S. forces to the country?
Okay, thanks for that question, Fadi. I'll just say we've been meeting with and talking to both sides in Libya, trying to find ways to get the country on the path for reunification, and we're doing it. We're doing through the security construct first, and hopefully we can set the stage and set the conditions for diplomatic process to continue. But at this Chad conference here in Kenya, we invited both sides to send their senior military leaders. Last year in both Botswana, even the previous year, both sides were in attendance. So we always welcome both sides at the Chad conference, where we had a meaningful exchange of ideas. But there's no discussion on troop movements. I'll just say that.
All right, thank you very much. Let's turn now to Jessica Donati of Reuters in Senegal. And the question is, can you offer your analysis on the latest series of major attacks in Nigeria and the Sahel? Do you see signs that groups are cooperating more broadly?
Well, Jessica, the recent attacks in Nigeria and across the Sahel are deeply concerning. The scale and brutality of some of these incidents are really troubling. So we're monitoring this closely, and these events and offering of sharing intel with Nigerian and also regional partners in that area remains constant. We are committed to supporting one of the most capable militaries in the region in Nigeria. Unfortunately, with our withdrawal out of the region, though, we have lost some of our ability to monitor terrorist attacks closely, but we continue to liaison with our partners to provide what support we can.
Thank you very much. Now let's go to Mr. Ngala Chimtom of In-Depth News of Cameroon. General Langley, in early April, before the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee, you questioned Burkina Faso's governance, asserting that its mining resources were being used to sustain the current regime. However, recent developments suggest a different picture. Reports indicate that Burkina Faso now earns $1,200 per ounce of gold, significantly up from $300 under French oversight. Traditionally, President Traore has allocated over $179 million in gold proceeds to provide farming equipment aiming to accelerate agricultural production. Given these facts, does this shift in resource allocation alter your previous assessment that raw material revenues primarily serve to keep Traore in power?
Well, Ngala, let me start with this. Every nation makes independent decisions regarding their security, and including partnerships. We all respect their sovereignty. Given these reports, I'm glad to hear that there's a shift in resource allocation that benefits civil society, because the enduring solution to counterterrorism does start with protecting civil society writ large. So from a military perspective, which were my comments were directed towards, concerns remain on military resourcing management of what external military support is received for the whole fight of terrorism across their sovereign nation. So the U.S. seeks opportunities to collaborate with Burkina Faso on counterterrorism challenges. I invited Burkina Faso's Chief of Defense to the African Chiefs Defense Conference because I believe in maintaining that dialogue. It's still open. It's still open conversation to be able to address the challenges of being able and solutions to be achieved through our collaboration for addressing the terrorist problem, which is the epicenter within their great country. And the great people of Burkina Faso deserve us to have that dialogue. Thanks.
My brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers, if we don't speak now, we will lose everything in the near future. This is not just about Burkina Faso. This is about every African nation that dreams of freedom. Today, it's Ibrahim Traore. Tomorrow, it could be your leader. It could be your soil. It could be your child taken in a war that wasn't ours. So please don't just watch this video. Don't just get angry. Share it. Talk about it and let the world hear us. Africa will decide its own destiny and no foreign general will stop that. If you believe in a free Africa and if you stand with Ibrahim Traore, then comment Africa Rise in the comments below. Share this video and let's flood the internet with the truth, because this fight is not just his but ours too.